The soft hum of the old ceiling fan mixed with the faint smell of engine oil as Charlie adjusted his glasses and leaned over the half-open wing of the small plane that had once been his pride. The plane wasn't just metal and screws. It was a memory, a birthday gift from Sarah, the woman who had somehow turned his quiet life into something that felt alive. Outside, the world was still half asleep. The dawn light painted the garage in shades of gold and dust, and the faint sound of the radio played a love song from another decade. Charlie's hands were steady, but his eyes carried the weight of something he'd never said out loud. The kind of truth that builds walls between hearts, even while pretending to protect them. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her suitcase already packed, her voice soft but firm as she said his name. He didn't look up immediately. He could always tell her mood by the tone she used when she said, "Charlie." This time it was part worry, part longing. She reminded him again that she'd be leaving soon, that her flight to London was in 3 hours, and once again she asked him to come with her, to take a few days off, to live outside the codes and secrets that defined his life. He smiled, a smile that was both apology and escape, saying he couldn't. There was too much work left, too much he couldn't explain. Sarah sighed, walked closer, and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You always say that," she whispered. He turned, wiped a streak of oil from his cheek, and said the line he'd used 100 times before. "Next time, I promise." She smiled sadly, kissed his forehead, and for a moment their world felt like it used to. Two people still trying to meet in the middle of their dreams. When she left, the garage felt colder, emptier. He stood there for a long while, staring at the little plane, wondering if he'd just watched his piece walk out the door. By 9 o'clock, he was at Langley, the place where truth went to die behind passwords and clearance codes. To everyone else, Charlie was a data analyst, a quiet genius who could find patterns in chaos, a man who lived for numbers and forgot birthdays, including his own. But behind that polite silence was something else, a man haunted by secrets he wasn't supposed to know. His real job wasn't to find truth. It was to bury it beneath layers of encryption. As he passed through the security scanners, machines he'd helped design, he felt that familiar unease in his chest, the irony that he was now trapped inside the very system he had built. The corridors buzzed with low chatter, screens flickered with encrypted messages, and somewhere deep beneath all of it, the world's ugliest truths slept under his fingertips. He reached his workstation, typed his multi-layered passcodes, and waited for the system to breathe to life. Then, almost like a ghost whispering through static, the message appeared. From Inquilin. That name had haunted his inbox for years. Never a face, never a trace, just pure intelligence. Inquilin wasn't just a hacker. They were a myth, a phantom who knew too much. Charlie had tried to trace them a dozen times, but the trail always vanished. And yet somehow their messages always reached him. This time the subject line read simply, "Truth comes with a cost." He hesitated before opening it. The encrypted data began to decrypt slowly, lines of code unraveling like veins across the screen. As the images formed, his heart dropped. Classified reports, mission summaries, field transcripts, and at the center, a name, Operation Harpstrike. The more he read, the colder the room felt. The operation was officially recorded as a counter-terrorism drone strike on a suicide bomber cell in Syria, but the decrypted data told another story. The bombing was staged, the location falsified, and the victims weren't terrorists. They were civilians, 150 of them, including French Special Forces and Danish Marines. The file was signed and authorized by none other than Chief Moore, his own superior, the woman who'd once told him that lies are just the language of diplomacy. Charlie sat frozen, his mind racing, his pulse pounding. He wasn't supposed to see this. This wasn't an error, it was a crime. He minimized the file and stared at his reflection in the darkened monitor, a man wearing a badge of loyalty over a heart full of betrayal. Hours passed in silence, his colleagues oblivious to the storm inside him. During lunch, he sat alone, pretending to eat while his mind replayed every memory of Moore. The closed-door meetings, The strange calls at midnight, the missions that never made sense. Could she really have done this? Or was he being baited? Another test in the endless maze of deception that was the CIA. His phone buzzed. Sarah. Her timing, as always, was both perfect and cruel. He took a deep breath before answering, masking the chaos in his voice. She told him she had landed safely in London, the weather was miserable, and she missed his coffee already. He smiled, forcing warmth into his tone, and said, "I'm proud of you. You're going to do great." She laughed softly, told him not to stay up too late, and hung up. He didn't tell her he was currently staring at the ugliest secret his country had ever hidden. He didn't tell her that part of him already feared what might come next. Instead, he opened another folder. He tried to trace the leak's source, cross-checking the encrypted metadata. The signal bounced across continents from Istanbul to Zurich, then back through a ghost network that shouldn't even exist. Whoever Inquilin was, they were inside the system, not just a hacker, but someone who'd once lived here, breathed this air. His stomach twisted. Every keystroke felt like falling deeper into a trap he couldn't see. Then another line appeared on the screen. "They know." That single phrase made his fingers freeze. The data stream cut abruptly, the message deleted itself, and the connection severed. For a moment, the hum of his computer felt like the only sound left in the world. He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the sky was bleeding orange, the end of another day. Down in the parking lot, employees walked to their cars laughing, free, unaware. Charlie envied them. He closed the blinds and sat back down, his eyes catching a framed photo of him and Sarah from last summer, laughing on the porch, her hands smudged with paint, his shirt stained with oil. That version of them felt like another lifetime. He whispered her name, then turned back to the computer. There was only one thing left to do. Verify. If what Inquilin sent was real, then every person in this building was complicit in one of the deadliest cover-ups in modern history. He ran a backtrace on Moore's personal clearance. The firewall was dense, but his system knew its architect, himself. Within minutes, he was inside her private server. Hundreds of files filled the screen, labeled with operations he didn't recognize. Some were marked confidential, others no record. But one folder stopped him cold. Harp Strike Visuals. He opened it. Dozens of drone feed videos played in silent horror, hospitals burning, children screaming, soldiers running into fire. He hit pause, leaned back, and pressed his palms to his eyes, fighting nausea. And then he saw something that shattered him completely. A timestamp from the same day Sarah had surprised him at the office months ago. She'd brought him lunch, kissed his cheek, and told him not to let the world turn you into one of its machines. While she was waiting in the lobby, he was helping encrypt this nightmare. The phone on his desk rang, breaking the trance. He hesitated, then answered. "Charlie, my office," Moore's voice commanded. Calm, controlled, the same voice that had signed death sentences under the name of peace. He gathered the scattered printouts, shoved them into a drawer, and walked down the hallway. Moore's office was dim, her blinds half closed. She motioned for him to sit. "You've been working late," she said, her eyes sharp. "Something bothering you?" He kept his face blank. "Just trying to solve a glitch in the archives," he replied. She smiled faintly, not warmth but warning. "Good, because in this place curiosity kills careers." He nodded and left, every instinct screaming at him to run. That night at home, the house felt colder than usual. He poured himself a drink, but it tasted like guilt. The small plane sat in the garage, its metal frame catching the dim light from the window. He touched its wing, remembering how Sarah had laughed when she gave it to him. "You're always fixing things," she'd said. "Maybe one day you'll fix yourself." He didn't know whether to smile or cry. He turned on the TV absent-mindedly, more for noise than company, flipping through channels until the screen froze. Breaking news. London hotel attack. Dozens dead. His breath caught. The reporter's voice trembled as she described 4 armed men storming a luxury hotel, opening fire, taking hostages. He reached for his phone, dialing Sarah again and again, but it went straight to voicemail. He whispered, "Come on, pick up." Then, as the coverage continued, the scrolling list of victims appeared at the bottom of the screen. His world stopped moving when he saw her name, Sarah Nolan. He sank to the floor, the glass shattering beside him, the TV blurring through tears. His hands shook as he whispered her name over and over, like saying it might bring her back. The room spun. His heart didn't just break, it fractured into something colder, sharper. In that moment, something inside Charlie changed forever. He stared at the screen, her name glowing under the headline, and whispered, "The truth killed her before I could tell her goodbye." Outside, the rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, like the sky itself couldn't stand what it had just witnessed. Inside the garage, the small plane waited unfinished, its wings stretched like a ghost of a dream that would never take flight again. The next morning rose gray and silent, as if even the sun was afraid to show its face to him. Charlie sat by the window, eyes hollow, watching the raindrops crawl down the glass. The world outside moved on. People walked their dogs, kids waited for school buses, taxis honked in rhythm. But his world had stopped the moment Sarah A.'s name appeared on that television screen. He hadn't slept. The night had been a loop of flashbacks, her laughter echoing in the kitchen, the smell of her perfume clinging to the pillow, the sound of her voice saying, "Don't let the world harden you, Charlie." And yet, that's exactly what was happening. Something inside him, the part that still believed in right and wrong, had started to die. By noon, he was back at Langley, walking through those sterile white corridors like a ghost with purpose. When Moore saw him, her expression flickered for just a second, the way someone's eyes flicker when they see a ghost of their own making. "Charlie," she said softly, almost motherly, "you shouldn't be here. Take time off. Grieve." He stared at her, saying nothing. Caleb appeared beside her, a smirk barely hidden beneath sympathy. "We're all sorry, man. London was a tragedy," he said, placing a rehearsed hand on Charlie's shoulder. But there was something in their calmness that didn't fit. How could they move on so easily? How could they stand in front of him, composed, while his world was ashes? Charlie's voice was low but steady when he finally spoke. "You knew," he said. Moore blinked once, slow. "Knew what?" "About the attack," he whispered. "About her. You knew something was coming." The silence that followed was colder than any denial. Caleb stepped forward. "Charlie, you're grieving. Don't make this harder for yourself." Charlie almost laughed, that hollow, dangerous laugh that sounds more like a wound tearing open. "For myself," he said. "You think this is about me? It's about her, about those people your lies killed." Moore's expression hardened, professionalism snapping back like armor. "Enough," she said. "You're crossing lines you don't understand." He looked at her for a long second, memorizing her face, every detail, every flicker of false concern, and then he turned and walked out without another word. That night, he didn't go home. He went to Sarah's garage, the one place that still smelled like her. The plane sat there under a tarp, half finished, a symbol of everything he'd never completed. Their conversations, their promises, their forever. He sat beside it on the cold floor, opened his laptop, and began building something new. If truth was poison, he would weaponize it. He inserted a small, translucent chip into the corner of his CIA badge, invisible, undetectable to scanners. A micro-extractor that could duplicate classified data in seconds. The data would upload to a hidden cloud and stay encrypted until one condition broke: his heartbeat. If he died, or if his pulse stopped for more than 5 hours, the files would automatically decrypt and release themselves to every major news outlet across the world. He called it the dead man's switch. And as he soldered the final connection, his reflection in the metal wing stared back like a stranger. He wasn't building safety anymore. He was building vengeance. 2 days later, he walked back into Langley with the same calmness of a man carrying a storm in his pocket. He smiled at the guards, passed through the scanners, his invention betraying its own maker, and went straight to Mord's office. She looked up from her paperwork, annoyed. I thought I told you to. He threw a thick file onto her desk. That's everything, he said. She frowned, flipping it open. It was a full report on Operation Harpstrike. Every hidden log, every falsified transcript. Where did you get this? She asked sharply. From the same place you buried it, he replied. She stood, trying to control her tone. Do you have any idea what you've done? Yes, he said quietly. I've given you a chance to fix it before the world does. Her eyes narrowed. And if I don't? He leaned closer, voice barely above a whisper. Then the truth goes live. Automatically. She froze. You're bluffing. When Henderson tried to provoke him, throwing him to the ground, Charlie never hit back, until one night when the colonel called Sarah's death collateral. Charlie snapped, slamming him against the wall, his hands trembling not from anger but restraint. Henderson didn't fight back. Instead, he said quietly, That's the man I was waiting to see. After that, something changed between them. Respect, or maybe recognition. Henderson began teaching him the kind of skills that weren't written in manuals. How to move unseen, how to tell when someone's lying, how to make silence your weapon. But even Henderson couldn't see that Charlie was already several moves ahead. Each night after training, Charlie used the restricted system inside the facility to copy more files. Not just on Moore, but on every Operation Shidi ever signed. He printed them, hid them under the floorboards, and scanned key pages into the chip embedded in his badge. Every 5 hours, he reset the timer on his phone, the one connected to his dead man's switch. It had become his heartbeat, his only sense of control in a world built on deceit. The more he uncovered, the clearer the picture became. Sarah's death wasn't random. It was a chain reaction, a message. Someone wanted to silence him through her. The same signatures, the same routing patterns, all tied back to an operation Moore had overseen 6 months earlier, one labeled Impact Investments. One night, as thunder rolled over the facility, Charlie sat in his quarters staring at a photo of Sarah. Her smile looked alive, caught between laughter and love. He whispered, I'll find them. His reflection in the window stared back. Same eyes, different man. The rain outside fell harder, echoing the same sound as that night in London. His phone buzzed, a new message from an unknown number, just one line. 5 hours until the truth explodes. He smiled faintly. The system was working. But the message wasn't from his code. It was from Inquilin. Someone out there still knew what he was doing. Someone who was watching, maybe even helping. He typed a single reply. Then let's burn the world together. The next morning, Henderson found him early on the range. You don't sleep, do you? The colonel asked. Charlie didn't answer. Henderson studied him for a moment, then said, Whatever you're planning, make sure you're ready for what it costs. Charlie looked up, eyes steady. I lost everything that mattered. What's left to lose? Henderson said nothing. He just nodded slowly, the look of a man who'd already buried too many soldiers who weren't supposed to be soldiers. Later that evening, Charlie sat alone in a dim bar near the outskirts of the compound. The jukebox played a soft blues song, the kind Sarah used to hum while cooking. He stared at the empty glass in front of him, at his reflection in the mirror behind the bottles. His hands were steady again, no tremor left. In his ear, a faint ticking sound from his watch, the timer counting down. 5 hours until the truth explodes. Hesmiel to himself, whispering the words like a vow. When justice fails, he said quietly, vengeance takes its job. The bartender looked at him strangely, but he didn't notice. He pulled out his phone, opened the encrypted app, and pressed his thumb to the screen. The code flickered green. Somewhere deep in the CIA system, hidden under millions of layers of firewalls, a silent heartbeat continued to count. Outside, thunder cracked again, lightning illuminating the wet street. Somewhere inside Langley, Moore and Caleb were already planning the next move. A file labeled containment. But Charlie didn't care. He had already crossed the line between truth and madness, and there was no going back. The man who once believed in systems was gone. All that remained was the mechanic who fixed broken things, Only this time, the thing he wanted to fix was the lie that had killed his wife. Paris looked like a postcard drawn in smoke and memory, the kind of city that hides its sins behind beauty. Charlie stood at a cafe window, his reflection overlapping the blurred crowd outside. A man in a gray coat. Charlie tracked him to a warehouse near the docks. The meeting was supposed to be a sale, military-grade weapons for private buyers. But instead of buyers, Charlie came. He used a voice distortion device, stepping out of the dark as Lawrence laughed. "You think you're clever?" the man said, reaching for his gun. Charlie fired first, one shot through the light bulb above them, plunging the room into red emergency glow. The second shot shattered Lawrence's knee. "You killed her," Charlie said, voice steady but cracking under weight. "Tell me who gave the order." Lawrence spat blood. "You think I knew her name? We just got paid. You were the target. She was collateral." The last word broke something in Charlie's chest. He leaned closer, eyes burning. "Collateral doesn't bleed in my arms." He walked away as the man screamed behind him, the fire alarm wailing into the night like a requiem for guilt. By now, the CIA was watching. Moore knew the pattern. Every location, every name connected to their old operation. "He's not stopping," Caleb warned. "He's dismantling us." Moore stared at the map, red pins spreading like infection. "Then we erase him completely," she said. In Berlin, the rain returned, because it always does when stories reach their breaking point. Charlie stayed in an abandoned apartment, his only light the glow of the laptop screen. The messages from Inquilin came every night now, encrypted, almost human in their rhythm. She gave him locations, intel, names. But more than that, she gave him something else, a voice that didn't judge. When they finally met, it was nothing like he expected. She wasn't a ghost behind a keyboard. She was a woman, maybe in her 30s, tired eyes, calm smile. She introduced herself simply. "My husband was the original Inquilin. He worked for them too, for your people, until he didn't." Charlie listened, realizing her story mirrored his, another life broken by secrets. "So why help me?" he asked. "Because," she said, "we both lost someone to the same lie." From then on, they worked together, not as partners in crime, but in truth. She became his conscience, the part of him Sarah used to be. Together, they started exposing Moore's hidden pipeline, black ops disguised as investments, funded through shell companies and blood. Every revelation drew the agency closer. Every leak drew death nearer. But for the first time, Charlie didn't care about survival. He cared about meaning. Madrid came next. The final thread. Horst, the man who had pulled the trigger in London, a soldier of fortune, a ghost who believed himself untouchable. Charlie and Inquilin tracked him through a maze of safe houses, fake passports, and digital trails. When they finally cornered him at a luxury hotel rooftop, Horst tried to bargain. "She wasn't supposed to die," he said, shaking. "It was chaos. Orders changed. Moore didn't want..." The gunshot cut him off. Charlie didn't remember pulling the trigger. The echo vanished into the sky, leaving only silence. Inquilin stood behind him, eyes wet. "You didn't have to," she whispered. "I already did," he said. The pool water rippled red as he turned away, the city lights flickering like dying stars. But vengeance doesn't close stories. It only opens darker ones. Within hours, the CIA descended on Madrid. Moore had authorized a full strike. Drones, ground teams, eyes in every shadow. Charlie and Inquilin fled through side streets, their breaths sharp, hearts pounding. They reached her safe house near the coast, where computers hummed like anxious thoughts. She uploaded the last of Moore's files, the entire Black Ops archive, onto a secure network. "Once this goes live," she said, "there's no going back. You'll be hunted forever." He looked at her and smiled faintly. "I already am." Then the walls shook. The windows exploded inward. The sky outside burned orange. Drones had found them. They ran through smoke and shattering glass, down a stairwell that groaned with fire, On the beach, the wind screamed like the dead. A bullet tore through the air and struck her side. She fell, gasping, clutching his arm. "No," he whispered, dragging her to cover. Her blood mixed with sand and rain. "Don't," she said, voice faint. "Don't die chasing revenge. Live proving it mattered." He pressed his forehead against hers, trembling. "You can't leave me too." She smiled weakly. "You already know how this ends." And then she was gone. The waves crashed against the shore, erasing their footprints before dawn. When the CIA arrived minutes later, all they found was fire and a laptop screen flickering with a single sentence: "When justice fails, vengeance takes its job." Charlie disappeared that night. Some said he drowned in the Mediterranean. Others whispered that he lived in the spaces between nations, a man with no face but every truth. But those who really knew him said that somewhere, in some quiet garage, there's a small repaired plane, and a man who still sits beneath its wings, waiting for the sky to forgive him. He lost his wife once. He won't lose her truth again. The rain in Bucharest was relentless, the kind that drummed on rooftops like a ticking clock, marking time for men who had already run out of it. Charlie stood under the flickering light of an abandoned warehouse sign, his coat soaked, his face expressionless. Across the street, Lawrence's convoy rolled in. 3 black SUVs, tinted windows, arrogance in motion. Charlie had been waiting for days, watching, tracking every step, every conversation, every breath. Lawrence was his final thread to Horst, the man who had ended Sarah's life, the man whose name still woke him at night in cold sweats. Inside the warehouse, the air smelled of dust, metal, and tension. On a steel table in the center sat a small, nondescript box wired to the walls. A bomb Charlie had built himself, designed not to kill instantly, but to speak in the language of fear. He had learned that fear breaks men faster than bullets ever could. When Lawrence entered, surrounded by his bodyguards, Charlie stood in the shadows, calm, patient, like a ghost who had been expecting him. "Mr. Green," Lawrence said mockingly, using the alias Charlie had sent. "You wanted to talk business? Let's talk." The door closed behind him, sealing the room. Charlie stepped forward into the dim light, his gun lowered, his voice low but sharp. "Business is what killed my wife. Let's discuss your profit margin on that." Lawrence frowned, scanning his face, realization slowly dawning. "You," he muttered. "You were supposed to be dead." Charlie smiled faintly. "That makes both of us ghosts, then." He gestured toward the table, where a laptop waited. "Sit. Let's play a game." Lawrence didn't move. "You think this is a negotiation?" Charlie replied, "No, it's a confession." The moment Lawrence sat, the screen flickered to life. Coded data scrolling, numbers changing, locks opening one by one. "Recognize this?" Charlie asked. "These are your transfers, every shipment, every payout. You and Moore used a company called Impact Investments to move blood money. But something changed in London. Someone ordered a cleanup and you pulled the trigger that killed her." Lawrence leaned back, feigning indifference, but his hands betrayed him. A twitch, a tap, the slow unraveling of control. "You don't understand how this world works," he said. "You think you can burn it down with truth? Truth doesn't survive without power." Charlie's gaze didn't waver. "Then I'll burn the power too." He tapped a key, and a countdown appeared on the screen. 5 minutes. A soft mechanical click echoed through the walls as the bomb armed itself. Lawrence's eyes widened. "You're insane." Charlie tilted his head. "No, just out of patience." The room filled with a faint hum as the wires began to warm, the smell of electricity mixing with fear. "You have 4 minutes to tell me where Horst is," Charlie said, walking slowly around him. 3 minutes to make me believe you. 2 before you start praying." Lawrence slammed his hands on the table. "Even if I tell you, you won't make it out alive." Charlie smirked. "I never planned to." Lawrence's voice cracked as he yelled. "He's in the Baltic. He runs shipments through the coast near Kaliningrad, Russian waters. That's where he hides. You'll never reach him. He'll kill you before you get close." Charlie stared at him for a long moment, the truth heavy and bitter in the air. Lawrence shouted after him. You'll die for nothing. Charlie didn't look back. I already lived for nothing. And with that, he stepped outside into the rain, closing the metal door behind him. He was 2 blocks away when the explosion tore through the night. The warehouse disintegrated into flame and echo. Windows shattered, alarms screamed, and the city held its breath. Charlie didn't flinch. He just kept walking, his silhouette swallowed by smoke and light. By morning, international news carried the headline, "Arms dealer Lawrence dead in Romania explosion, terrorist link suspected." The CIA analyzed the footage, and Moore smirked when she saw the fireball. "He's done," she told Caleb. "He finally burned himself out." Caleb nodded, but didn't look convinced. "He's too methodical to die by accident," he said. Moore dismissed him with a wave. "Dead men don't build systems. Move on." But she was wrong. The system was already moving without him. Back in Warsaw, Charlie sat in a train compartment, a hood over his head, laptop open. His fingers danced over the keys, tracing encrypted signals. Moore's encrypted calls, her secret network. The very software she trusted for her communications had been his creation. He smiled faintly. Every word she spoke, every lie she told, now whispered itself into his ear. He heard her panic, her desperation, her fear of exposure. She was trying to clean up the mess, erase files, transfer funds, silence witnesses, but you can't erase ghosts. Charlie rerouted her data, embedding her confessions into international security archives under anonymous names. One leak, one file, and the entire world would know what the CIA had buried. He didn't want fame or forgiveness, he just wanted her to feel what he felt. Helplessness. Days turned into nights as he traveled north, each stop bringing him closer to the Baltic coast, to Horst. The cold bit deeper now, but he didn't feel it. He was sustained by purpose alone. When he finally reached Kaliningrad, the air smelled of salt and machinery. The port was quiet except for the low groan of cargo ships and the cry of distant gulls. He spent 2 days observing, men loading crates, security cameras scanning blind spots. A large yacht anchored offshore under false registration. That was his destination. That was Horst's ghost ship. At dawn, wrapped in the fog, Charlie moved. He hacked the dock's security system, rewiring the cameras to loop 2 minutes of empty footage. With the precision of someone who had rehearsed his own death, he slipped onto a small maintenance boat and steered toward the yacht. The closer he got, the louder the hum of the engine, the thicker the tension in his chest. When he boarded, no one noticed at first. The crew, hardened men with dead eyes, smoked by the railing, speaking in Russian. He moved quietly, every step rehearsed. But as he entered the lower deck, the smell of oil and gunmetal hit him. And then a voice. "You took your time," it said. He froze. Horst stood in the corridor, taller than memory, eyes pale and empty. "I was starting to think you'd given up," Horst said, smirking. "You think you win just because you tell the world?" Charlie smiled faintly. "The world doesn't need to believe me. It just needs to see you." And as the Interpol forces swarmed the deck, handcuffing Horst and his crew, Charlie closed his eyes, exhaling a breath that felt like release. For years, he had carried the weight of silence. Tonight, the ocean carried it for him. When dawn came, the sky above the Baltic was pale gold, fragile, beautiful, forgiving. Charlie stood at the ship's railing, wrapped in a gray blanket, watching as Interpol agents documented every inch of evidence. He didn't speak when they thanked him, didn't explain how he'd done it. He simply looked at the horizon and whispered. She'd have loved this light. That same morning at Langley, Moore's empire crumbled. The leaks hit global media before sunrise, documents, audio files, and recordings, all pointing to her Black Ops network. Moore was escorted from her office in silence, her badge deactivated, her empire gone. As she walked past the monitors showing her own face on the news, she muttered under her breath, "He built the system that destroyed me." Somewhere across the ocean, Charlie smiled. Months later, winter returned to Virginia. The sky was white with slow snow. the kind that fell without sound, blanketing the world in a hush that felt almost sacred. Charlie walked alone through the small cemetery on the edge of town. The trees were bare, their branches bending under the quiet weight of frost. He stopped at a headstone carved with her name, Sarah Bennett, beloved wife, endless light. He knelt slowly, pulling from his coat pocket the small wooden puzzle she had once given him, the one she bought in London, the one that had followed him across continents. It was finished now, each piece locked perfectly into place. His hands trembled as he set it gently on her grave. "I fixed it," he whispered, voice breaking. "You always said I could fix anything." He smiled through tears. "You were right. I fixed the truth. But I couldn't fix losing you." The wind brushed against his face, soft as her touch, and for a moment, it felt like she was still there, laughing somewhere just beyond his reach. He stood, breathing in the stillness, then turned toward the small hangar behind their old home, the one they had built together before the world turned cruel. Inside, under a tarp covered with dust and time, sat the little plane Sarah had given him on his birthday. He ran his hand along its wing, the metal cold beneath his fingers. "You were my reason to build," he whispered, tightening the straps of his jacket. "Now you're my reason to stop." The engine coughed, then roared to life, filling the hangar with sound and light. Snow swirled in the wake of its propellers as the plane rolled down the makeshift runway. As the aircraft lifted into the morning air, the world below seemed smaller, gentler, and somehow clean again. He climbed higher, the clouds opening like gates, sunlight spilling across the wings. In the distance, the horizon stretched endlessly, a reminder that peace isn't a place, but a decision. Charlie reached into his pocket, pulling out a photograph of Sarah laughing beside their unfinished plane, her hair caught in the wind. He smiled, tears catching the light. "You were the only truth I ever needed," he whispered. Then he set the picture on the dashboard right beside the small puzzle piece he had kept for himself, a reminder that even broken things can find completion. Below him, the world carried on. Cities waking, rivers moving, people dreaming of tomorrows they didn't yet understand. Above, the clouds glowed like fire and forgiveness. He tilted the plane slightly, letting it drift toward the sunrise. The camera of fate seemed to pull back then, the little silver plane becoming a speck of light in the sky, fading slowly into the endless gold. And as the screen of life darkened, a final message appeared against the light of dawn. Truth has no flag, only those brave enough to carry it. Real truth doesn't come from winning or revenge. It comes from the courage to face what is broken and still choose to fix it. Charlie's journey teaches that love and integrity are the only things that outlive power. And even when life takes everything, purpose can still lift you above the ashes. Sometimes justice isn't about proving who's wrong, but remembering who you promised to be.